It is John Gibbons. It is my favourite season. It's the first one of these we've done as video as well. So if you are enjoying it as video, then nice one. And also you'll see, and the listeners will soon hear, that we're on location. Thursday shows are sponsored by Green King Sports, and we've come because there's a little bit more time, a little bit more leeway. We've come to Green King Sports pub. So we are in the Lime Street Central, which, as its name suggests, is literally around the corner from Lime Street. It's a fantastic place. We were just saying it'd be a good place to watch a half five.
Absolutely.
Very much so. We've got the beers in. We're being looked after by both Lime Street Central and Green King Sports, and we appreciate that. And if you download the app, you'll get 10% off drinks whenever you're here or in any Green King pub when there is sport on the telly, which is a lot. There's replays now. I don't know if that counts.
I don't know if it counts either, but let's just say it does.
It's probably just live sport, but when there's live sports on the telly, you get 10% off if you download Green King Sports app. So nice one to them for partnering with us, for looking after today. And it is my favourite season, 2013-2014. I was going to say this may be my favourite season as well, but I think I've said that to all the seasons so far. So whether I'm easily swayed by these things, but I did love it. But I've got Martin, Neil and Stevie. When I sent this email out, about a year ago now, asking for their favourite season, they picked this one. So we'll start with you, Neil. Why did you pick this?
Because it was the most fun. There's no sort of... It was the most fun. It was also the reminder of the fun. I think it's both things. It's like, it's worth saying there was extended periods of it not being very much fun, even when Liverpool were really good prior to this point. This is it's a very much a pre-Klopp season, obviously, but in a number of ways, you weren't going in with a ton of expectation, but that expectation got to grow, and it got to grow quite quickly if you were on board with it. I think also it was just a triumph of hope over reality in a number of different ways. There was so much to get behind. And it just hadn't been, for an extended period, tons and tons of fun supporting Liverpool. You had the end of Benitez, and even the late end of Benitez, like 08-09, I've always said, wasn't fun. Played some really good stuff, won some really good matches, had some really good laughs, especially those games around Chelsea and Manchester United. But ultimately, it was still, in a number of ways, quite unpleasant in and around the ground on a regular basis. And so the last season, that was anywhere near as enjoyable as this one, I'd argue. Even predates Istanbul in that, loads of bits of 04-05 going to the match on a regular basis, going to Crystal Palace and they barely have a shot, stuff like that, whereas this felt alive. The nearest one I can think of before this is the treble winning season under Houllier, and then this one just becomes this just enormous party that everyone realises they're invited to, and I think that's something that is genuinely unique for this club, because I think the other thing to point out is Liverpool very rarely do sort of insurgency-based seasons, because we're Liverpool. We're one of the biggest clubs on the planet, but things have been bad for an extended period in a number of different ways, and then you get this, and it really is just like a gift of a season, and it was just absolutely heady, unbelievable, exciting. It was genuinely brilliant.
Steve, why do you pick it?
I mean, lots of the reasons that Neil has said. I think with the way time sort of works in your mind, you forget how close you are to 09-10 in 13-14.
Yeah.
And 09-10 is when it all starts being quite miserable on a regular basis, and you sort of get used to that. With the big high point of sort of Kenny coming back and the sense that you could start to enjoy it again in some sense, and obviously stuff around the ownership being resolved. I think it was Liverpool were just kind of a riposte to everything that was. It felt like it was us against the world, but that the world were there to be persuaded, and we the joy of calling it from a long way out. I mean, I called it from Newcastle away the season before, and I'm not saying that in a I predicted it kind of way, because I call it every season that we're going to win the league. But to say that you called it and then you see it sort of coming to fruition, you can see the way that these footballers, which now when you look back again, when you look back and you go, well, that team with Coutinho, Sturridge, Suarez, Sterling, Henderson, Gerrard, that's a good side, a few cracks in the defence, but that's okay. You'd expect them to be challenging for the title, but nobody was expecting them. The Guardian's prediction, the Guardian writers, not the not Andy Hunter's prediction, as it always says, as that disclaimer to protect Andy and others from the wrath of people on social media, was that Liverpool would finish sixth. And looking back at that looks crazy, but the interview with Steven Gerrard on the dawn of pre-season is all about how we have to get back in top four. That's what we're aiming for. It's going to be tough. Steven sort of being Stephen, and I think Stephen kind of transforms across the season into a radical optimist, and without any spoilers, there's a sting in the tail there. But I think people think that the sting in the tail is the thing that we all care about and are preoccupied and still cry over. I think partly 1920 helps with that. That you don't have to feel that anymore anyway, that was our one big chance and it didn't happen. But I don't think it was that at the time either. I've never been more proud of a Liverpool side than what they do in the last game of this season, and everything in between. Almost everything in between, apart from a few really, really tough times that we'll talk about, is just fun. It's just great. Everyone really enjoyed themselves, and something about the age I was probably at, sort of 31, 32, when you feel like oh, I've seen this a few times now, and you remind yourself, it doesn't matter how old you are, you haven't seen everything yet. You haven't seen some of the things that Luis Suarez and Daniel Sturridge can do this season. They will surprise you, and this team was constantly surprising throughout it, and yeah, it was just incredible fun.
Martin?
I mean, I was 42 when this season happened, and I thought I had seen it all. So I think the first thing is it is the way that this season does take you by surprise, and that's always more compelling than a thing that you expect to be taken by surprise like that. I also think that so much of what has happened since started here, particularly in terms of the fan culture around the club. Towards the end of the season, we're meeting coaches. It seemed like it got a little bit younger, home and away, and it seemed like a new breed of supporter had come in that thought, this is our time. We don't have to constantly talk about the past all the time. From a personal point of view, I mean, I was going home and away. It was the first around this year, maybe the season before. I just met you guys. Yep. The Anfield Wrap was relatively new. It had only been going maybe a year or 2 years or so. So it seemed like all of these things coalesced around this point. And then this season, happened to you. And I felt like the last 2-3 months, I genuinely felt like a kid again. And every week in between games, I was just obsessed with looking at tables and fixtures and all of that sort of stuff. And Steve's right about the sting in the tail, but you don't need a happy ending to make a great film. Casablanca's a great film. They don't get together. Spoiler alert for anyone that's not seen that. And Steve's right in the sense that how sort of proud he was, because I was as well, and I know a lot of other people were. And then the players, I loved, that front six, I loved all of those players. So yeah, it's the one that sort of sticks out to me as the beginning of something.
I think the young thing's dead interesting because I think that a number of things happened quite quickly, which I think meant some people decided they didn't want to go anymore, which was all perfectly reasonable, by the way. I think there's the end of Benitez, there's the stuff that's ongoing around the takeover and Hicks and Gillette, there's Kenny coming in, but then there's Kenny having to go in there as well. There's the way and the nature of Rodgers. I think he just pissed a lot of people off and rubbed a lot of older Liverpool supporters up the wrong way, which I think is perfectly reasonable. But what people actually did was they stopped going to matches. They gave the tickets either permanently away or gave the loyalty. You
didn't even mention Hodgson.
Well, no, Hodgson as well burns people off, but Hodgson's not really almost there long enough. But yeah, obviously, Hodgson burns people off too. So you end up in this situation where I do think there was like this idea that there was a bit of a vacuum in terms of literally, as we always talk about, who could get the tickets.
And that's the reason I brought up Hodgson, was a lot of the people I know got tickets under Hodgson because people just stopped buying them. And then that's where I always remember Mary Lund, to give her a shout out. She moved to Liverpool that year. She said it's fucking brilliant. I got a ticket every week. Do you know what I mean? And so I think a lot of the people got their tickets then when no one else wanted to go, and then suddenly had the credits for when it mattered.
One of the most interesting facts about this season is the highest attendance at Anfield this season was for the first game. They never top the attendance after that, which in part speaks to some of the stuff that I think you're talking about. It's crazy when you can consider how feral the end of the season felt, and you thought there were people everywhere asking for tickets, but the highest attendance at Anfield is for the game against Stoke City that season.
And I think part of that then feeds into the football that we're going to talk about. It was the sort of football that they don't end up with this unlikely title challenge they do win, ironically, the first 3-1-0, but they don't end up with this unlikely title challenge by virtue of dogging it out over and over again. I think almost in loads of ways, all the way through the campaign, actually, I think the football pissed people off. And there's some people who did not like it. And I'm quite glad those people aren't in the ground for when it's happening. Or if there's
people who are week in, week out saying, but you can't win like this every week. You can't, you can't keep doing it like this. And it's like, well, what do you think's, there's not going to be some kind of rule change that make it. I think people you're always looking to see where the iceberg's coming, and don't. I think this is how to enjoy a title season. Is sort of the is a big part of it, and a lot of people really don't enjoy it. They don't enjoy being part of a title race, and I understand that. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of what if it goes wrong, but I just think Liverpool as a team and us as a fan base, more increasingly through the season, aren't thinking about what happens if it goes wrong. We are just enjoying it. The players, they're these big sort of cartoon characters. You've been used to slightly identikit footballers over time, and to be fair, a lot of the ones that Brendan himself seems to prefer and want to bring in are a bit like that. They're sort of 13 and 14 out of 20 footballers across the board, whereas you've got these sort of people like Sturridge, Coutinho, Suarez, who they're just they're national headline grabbing characters. People, you see it in Sturridge's broadcast work now, that they're just huge personalities, and they demand of us what we demand of them, I suppose. There's so many times in the ground. We'll talk a lot, I think, about outside after the game and before the game a lot of the time as well, and really enjoying it. But there was some of the best noises I've ever heard, just individual noises from the game. One of the Spurs at home, where everyone just gets onto it collectively and just goes, wow. Some of the stuff you've seen is stuff that you will never, and we have never seen again, from footballers who are sort of finding themselves as well. Suarez, who goes on to be for 2 years the best. He's the best player in the world in this season, as far as I'm concerned. But literally, you can prove it with maths that in his his Barcelona career, he's much better than the next best fella who he plays with, and then the other fella who's in the same league as well. He's ludicrous numbers, but this is just more than the numbers. The things he's doing are absolutely absurd, and it drives everyone, I think, to that next level too.
I think on that point you made about sometimes our own fans struggling to enjoy a title challenge, and a point you made earlier about the world was ready to be persuaded. I definitely look back on this season as someone that doesn't live in the city as the season where not just neutrals but fans of other teams apart from Man City were really into us. And I remember when we get to the Arsenal game at home, I remember, and it happened throughout this season, getting loads of texts off people. Are you there? Are you watching this? And then you'd see people that you hadn't seen for a couple of months, and they liked Liverpool. It seemed that everyone else got onto it a little bit earlier than some of us. And as a team that's not often liked by neutrals, I definitely remember so much goodwill this season.
I hope it's not betraying a confidence, but the second to last Labour Prime Minister was very much on board. I was told Gordon Brown was willing us on, and very impressed. But I think that's right. Across the country, people were on to. I think particularly that Arsenal game is the one where it's just everything about Arsenal is kind of the sort of. I think as well, if you're the kind of person who bought into Arsenalness and Arsene Wenger and all that kind of thing, you buy into something a bit like what we were doing, but Arsenal weren't really doing that at this point. And there's lots of those throughout the season. And Neil's right. It is strange that the first three are prosaic. They are Liverpool getting it done, getting results, showing I suppose they've got the mettle for this, and then from there building towards something mad.
I just want to mention as well, before I add a bit more context and we get into the games, I think it's a great advert for less football this season. And when they have arguments about how many games there should be in a season and stuff like that, and people saying, football fans want more. Listen, if you offer anyone more of anything, they will say yes. More sweets, more beer, and more football, please. Luckily, we've got plenty of the first two on the table. But I think Liverpool play 42 games this season. They're not in Europe. They get knocked out of both cups really early. And so by the end of the season, especially, it's one game a week, and it's fucking brilliant. And like you said, Martin, this idea of like, you know, looking forward to it all week. I remember like Monday was the hangover in work, and we all, you know, I say we all, me and Neil had full-time jobs there, and Anfield Wrap hadn't become a sort of employment thing, so we were doing it alongside work, and you know, it was great. I loved that time, but I think, you know, so Monday was like sort of get through it, and then by Tuesday you were looking forward to the weekend again, and it's a cliche, but everywhere you went, people were talking about the football, and it's the first time I remember. You know, you talk about like the city coming alive and stuff like that, but for a sustained period, like obviously like Istanbul is massive for the city and stuff like that, but it's massive around the final. Like even like the semi-final and stuff like that. Like you didn't really notice it as much like in the city. Like on the day, I'm talking about all week. You go to the sandwich shop, people are asking you, do you think we're going to do it? Get your hair cut, the barber's going, are we going to win the league? You know, do you reckon they're going to do it? Or they're just telling you we are. And it was like, it was a real, like, it was like watching, it was like living an advert for football. And you talked about that Arsenal game. BT made an advert of that game, and it's Jose Mourinho going unbelievable and stuff like that. And it felt like, honestly, like everywhere you went, it was like, yeah, but what about the Reds? And I just adored it. And then you just built up, and then by Friday you were exploding and ready to go. And it's no wonder people met the coaches and all that. They just had to do something with all this energy. And then they'd win 4-0. It was fucking brilliant. And we get drunk for 2 days.
Yeah, it was crazy times.
No, but I think it was part of that. The other thing that genuinely helps this year, it's mad, but the Blues do well.
Well, yeah. And the year before, they finished above us the year before.
Finished above us the year before, but it's Martinez has come in and replaced Moyes. So the year before was, to use that word, was quite a prosaic Everton team. But Martinez comes in, they've got Lukaku up front.
They win at Old Trafford.
They win at Old Trafford the night that Suarez is outrageous. But what really helps is genuinely the whole city was buzzing. You know, and it was, and we do a lot of jokes about Everton these days, and I'm fine with that. In fact, I actively encourage it. But the flip side of it is, my ideal Everton's either one that's doing really well or really badly. I've got no interest in the middle in Everton, and Everton that's doing really well, because what it did was I just thought that everyone was into it. There's a day where we win. I think it might be the game against West Ham away, and they beat Arsenal at Goodison Park, and everyone was out. Like everyone was out. Like you're out afterwards, and suddenly United's got all this new energy that's going on all over the place, because they're just not. Everyone's out. You've just watched the Everton game, and because we've been great, and also they sort of do us a favour in inverted commas. Not that it matters then, but you're like fucking hell. And also they play good stuff. You watch them go, they're fucking good to hear the Blues. And I think all of this, it just lent itself to. You know, and in the end, we will have to talk negatively about Everton in the context of the season. That will have to come within there, and it is a shame because of the other stuff. But I think all of it lent itself, because you'd be talking to your point of, you go into a place and someone's talking to you about it. The fella sat next to you in the barbers might be a Blue.
Yeah.
And how'd you think you're going to get Champions League? Yeah, we can get Champions League here. And there was a genuine energy.
Well, you could sort of both have a conversation where you both sort of admit, you could both go, he could go, tell you what, that's Suarez is a good player, isn't he? And you could go, yeah, Lukaku's doing well, isn't he, though, for you? And you literally,
Sparkley was playing well,
You know, I mean, I remember the build-up, the taxi to the home derby with you and Adam Mealer, I think, Neil, and you were genuinely going. I think they had a couple of them coming back from injury or something.
He really fancied it.
These are good, yeah. And you know, this is one of our tough home games. You know, as it turned out, Liverpool, you know, were brilliant. But they needed to be brilliant, and I think that Everton and Liverpool, it felt a bit like both teams were on the same page in terms of how this needs to look now, and what's your response to Man City, what's your response to, you know, how do you get your way around what you can see happening in terms of the money and all that kind of thing, and this looked like, and you know, rightly or wrongly, this looked like a way forward for both clubs really, to play this kind of handbrake off, let's see what happens kind of football. Which Liverpool probably lose the season after, and you know, and we all know what happens from there. But during that this whole season, you're right, the whole city is alive.
Okay, let's do a bit of context before we get into the games then. Liverpool finished the 12-13 season in 7th place, like I said, one behind Everton, but finished the season really strongly, with Coutinho and Sturridge arriving in the January and doing really well. That Newcastle game being a highlight where Steve tipped us to win the league the next year. Suarez finishes as Liverpool's top scorer with 23 league goals. That's despite missing the last 4 games because of Brighton Ivanovic. He then spends the whole summer trying to go to Arsenal. He does not. Liverpool play in front of 96,000 in Melbourne, which is a huge thing. They also play in Indonesia on the way there and in Bangkok on the way back. Those were notable games for those there as well. Going into this season then, 13-14, Suarez remains banned for the first 6 games of the season. From his return, me and Martin talked about this before, Liverpool averaged 2.9 goals a game for the rest of the season. But before all that, there is 3 1-0s in the league. I'll just do the ins first of all. It's a really funny summer for transfers. Luis Alberto comes in. I think he's maybe the highest in terms of spend. Iago Aspas comes in for a similar amount. We get Simon Mignolet in goal from Sunderland. Kolo Touré comes in at a free. Thiago Laurie comes in for the fair size. Mamadou Sakho, he'll be the highest actually. He comes in right on deadline day, so isn't available for these first few games. We also get Sissoko on loan late and Victor Moses on loan late. The transfers are really mad. They all happen really early or really late, and there's absolutely nothing for a while. Out, Carragher retires in the summer. Andy Carroll moves on. We get 15 million for Carroll. We get 5 million for John Joe Shelby. He's playing against us soon. Jay Spearing moves on. We get a little bit of money for him, and Stuart Downing moves on as well. So there's a little bit of old guard going, a little bit of Kenny's boys who didn't sort of quite work out, and there's a few new lads coming in who we're quite excited about. But we'll go straight into the first league game if that's okay with everyone, unless anyone's got anything they want to talk about for pre-season. Liverpool 1, Stoke 0. Sturridge gets the goal. Simon Mignolet saves the pen. Martin, it's a big moment. It helps that it's Jonathan Walters. He was a bit of a cartoon baddie.
It's his debut as well, isn't it? Mignolet's debut.
Yeah. But it's a massive. I remember being really excited about it because Sunderland fans loved him. They had a great song for him that we just sort of never really adopted. But I think like they were like, he's brilliant, and then he comes in and saves the penalty. You're like, fucking hell, they're right.
And it was like the 90th minute.
Really late, really late.
I think.
Yeah. I mean, my memory of this is obviously being in the ground, and it just. I mean, the first game of the season, and you save a penalty in the 88th minute, you're going to have a good time. But I really remember Neil's intro to the Anfield Wrap after this. I don't know if you remember, but you said, "Mum, I want to go back to school again. Mum," or like, "Get me to the game." And you just kept saying it. "Mum, take me back there." And you were kind of play acting, or maybe not, as a child. You were talking to your mum in the intro. To
that. Be creative.
Yeah. I'm not making a comment on whether you've gone uphill or downhill since, but I just remember that one. and it did feel. I mean, that on its own, the sort of poetry of that game and the arc of that game, just did. You just walked out of that ground, bouncing because like a last minute, penalty save's got to do that.
I think there's a thing with the game where there is a little bit of an element of there's scepticism about the manager. They finish the season strongly. They get as many points in the last 14 games as Man City do. That's part of why Steve's shout wasn't wild. They don't get as many as Arsenal do. Arsenal actually finished the previous season really strongly. Arsenal looked the part.
Arsenal for quite a bit of the season, well, literally up till they're top of the league.
Top of the league, yeah.
With the best defence in the league.
Yeah. And there's probably one of the games at Arsenal is one where we do get taken apart and do get taught a lesson.
Yeah, they're excellent. Arsenal are lively. But there's a thing that I think happens in the grounds for this one, and it's a good thing about first games, is there was a really strong energy. I remember the energy more than I remember the game. Fuck it, we might as well enjoy it then.
Yeah.
We've got no idea what's coming next year, but fuck it, we might as well enjoy it then. Let's just go for this. And I think in loads of ways, the best thing that happens is the save pen, because it gives you that sort of final punchline. It gives you the 3 points. Gerrard grabs him by the throat afterwards, like grabs him.
Double save. He saves the pen, and then Kenwyne Jones comes in and it's more the second save, which is like a sort of It's not quite Dudek in Istanbul, but it's a real reaction save where everyone in the ground, I think you see, he saved it, but they're going to score the rebound now, and they don't, and it just I think the Mignolet at his best and in this game looks like that kind of. The Schmeichel comparisons were made because of his physical size, which he wasn't always able to use as effectively. He seems to shrink at times. In the goal. But in this game, he sets the tone. Absolutely. I mean, it's Daniel Agger who gives away the penalty, which is another madness to me that Daniel Agger's in this squad.
Plays so many games.
So, I think he plays about 16 in the league, and that just feels, when you just look back mentally, the fact that Daniel Agger and Raheem Sterling are in the same squad makes no sense to me, because they're just different generations, different eras. Probably 2 or 3 eras back. Liverpool, But it also, that's testament to Rodgers to a certain extent. You know, a lot of made of sort of his kind of ego and stuff like that. But the thing that I also admired about Klopp was the extent to which footballers he hadn't signed were able to be used and melded into his team. I think that's a mark of good coaching. You know, the fact that obviously Klopp leaves with Joe Gomez still in the squad, who he didn't sign, and you feel that with Brendan at his best here is kind of like the alchemy of people who aren't really his players, who might not even be people he would have chosen. I think we had a lot of discussion at the time about would Gerrard not being there somehow solve a problem for him, in that it was such a big question at the time of what role does Gerrard play, and that's mad. It's a mad thing to discuss, isn't it? It's a mad thing to think.
Gerrard sorted out over the course of the season.
Gerrard absolutely sorted out. Yeah, and Brendan and the players around him, and Jordan Henderson, who is just the perfect midfield partner for him, and Joe Allen, who does really well.
I mean, at this point in the season, obviously we all knew about Gerrard. You know, Henderson had been there for a while. But I think he has his best season this season up to this point.
Season,
but you wouldn't have ever predicted that Sterling and Coutinho would have gone on to become the players that they did and had the careers that they did. And that starts for them really this season. So that front six, Gerrard, Henderson, Sterling, Coutinho, Suarez and Sturridge, they're 6 great
--
players. And we didn't know that before the start of this season.
No,
some of that happened. Some of that happened this season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You think about for these first few games, he plays Sturridge up top. Obviously, Suarez is suspended. He's got Coutinho left. Henderson's actually wide right in a sort of 4-2-3-1. He's got Aspas in the hole, sort of trying his best. And then it's Lucas alongside Gerrard deep. So that's what he's going with in these early games, Neil.
The other thing he's got though is he's got Colo Touré.
Yeah.
And Colo lands game 1. I mean, his general demeanour, he literally says in his first interview, we can win the league. He says this in July, we can win the league. And then he plays from minute 1, like, I think we can win the league. And he steps in. I always remember he got injured in the game against Notts County, game 3. And people were acting like, oh, well, fuck now then. He's only played 2 league matches for us at this point. But he genuinely was so impressive.
Yeah, I think that's how good he is at Villa. And we can jump on to Villa because I think that felt like a tough game. Stoke was important. It was a big win. And I always remember in Kenny's first proper season, we'd drawn him 1-1 against, I think it was Sunderland, and we went 1-0 up in that game and got pegged back. And we just never sort of seemed to recover. And I remember this feeling like notable because of that, because that had only been 2 seasons before.
I think you're coloured by that, It's when went down against the bar, isn't it?
Yeah,
That game is probably in everyone's minds at the time.
when this is sort of happening, and so for Mingele to do that, I was like, no, this is going to be different. But that Villa one was a big win. To be honest, I can't remember how good Villa were it was sort of around that time because they've been very up and down. Obviously, they've been relegated and all sorts, but it was still going away to Aston Villa. Sturridge scores a brilliant goal.
Really good goal.
I love it.
It's incredible.
Yeah, he's just sort of dancing through it. It's all instinct. And I remember hearing an interview afterwards to say he had to watch it to realise what he did because he's just sort of living in the moment, dancing about. He scores a great goal. But I remember Colo being brilliant, and I was in the away end, which is on the side of Villa, and he's coming over at the end and he's giving it, and I'm like, fuck it out. We haven't just got a footballer here. We've got a leader and someone who's going to really help us in these situations.
Yeah, I mean, just on the goal, I think what's brilliant about the goal is it's a really good marker of just simply the fact that Sturridge's feet and brain are faster than everybody else's. So if he can't remember, part of why he can't remember is, to your point, he's so in the moment. He's just keeping the ball alive until he can get a shot away. And he's going to get a shot away, and he is going to keep the ball alive, and these aren't as good as him. And I think it was he finishes the previous season strongly, Sturridge, and he looks like we've got a serious player on our hands here. But I think this goal, in loads of ways, sets up a lot of what's to come for Daniel, because you just left being gobsmacked by, as I say, his technical talents, but also the fact that the ability just to, it's almost quite he scores loads of goals over the course of the season, Sturridge, and obviously so does Suarez. This is arguably his most Suarez goal, in that it's this idea of, I'm just going to keep this thing alive.
Stuck away.
Yeah, maybe stuck away, but it's just
a similar goal. Really.
Yeah, keep it up on the line. I'm just going to keep this alive until an opportunity comes up, and when it does, I'm going to drill it home, and that's what he does. But to what Touré does over the course of the game, for me, it's one of the standout performances at this stage. He is that good through this one, and he just craves it. I think that this is it's a really important part of this early part of the season. Toure has got experience, he's been there, seen it, done it. We know from his post-football career, he's done work as a coach and so on, so we know he's an impressive person to have around the place. And I think the impact he is having. There was the meme of "Don't worry, Colo is here" or something like that with the circles around it, and there's his face. And a lot of this stuff can seem sort of silly. Seems silly now, even could have seemed silly at the time. But part of it was, this is how good he's been. This is how good he was, just in those small doses. He was the absolute business this day, Toure, and he just made you believe.
I think this is a really important part of the season for Sturridge, because he did finish the previous season really well. And he formed a really good partnership with Suarez. He got a great goal at Fulham, which I've watched 100 times. I've never understood how he does that finish.
With the hat-trick.
Yeah. But he'd never really been the main man anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. He'd never been like the number 9, the main man that a team puts his house on. Suarez is now out until I think the 6th game or something, and Sturridge comes in. And he wins the first 9 points in the league. Yeah. And I always think it's big for a player if they can always look at points and go, they're my points.
Yeah. Well, that third game as well, Martin, to Man United, he had a bit of a knock in the week, and apparently Gerrard went, listen, lad, we need you on the pitch. And sort of persuaded him to get out there, to strap up whatever was up with him and get out there. And then he gets the winner again. And imagine what Gerrard was saying to him after the game, like, you've got yourself on the pitch, you're not 100% and you've won us that game. And I think he did get a lot from that.
But also, just imagine it the other way. If he doesn't score against Stoke, if he doesn't score against Villa, everyone's waiting for Suarez to come back. Yeah. Sturridge seems like a player he seems like a person who is full of confidence. But this was his biggest test of his career to date. He hadn't played for England yet. And there's a whole team and a whole fan base relying on him to score the goals. And he delivers in the first 3 games. And that must have been huge for him. That must have set him up for the rest of the year.
And there's a lot of, when he arrives, that it hasn't quite worked at City and Chelsea, and people go, well, he's had 2 goals at big clubs now, and neither of them have quite fancied him enough to invest and go, this is our number 9. And the fact that Liverpool do, it just brings out all of the best in him and all the different. It's like an amalgam of every great striker you've seen play for Liverpool. Like he's Torres and he's Rush and the United goal is like is Diogo Jota, like all over, just popping up, and he scored with minimum fuss and economy. He's got them all. He's got everything. He can head it. He can hit it from distance. He can finish in a 1-on-1 as cool as anyone. I mean, I genuinely think there was no one. I don't know. There's a patch in here which is for me, Suarez, Torres are the best player, best Salah are the best out and out finishers, forwards I've seen play for Liverpool live. I've seen Rush as a younger fan, but to see someone flourish and remind you of all of them, but also be so much himself. Was just amazing, and also be able to create and be able to play with other players. He was instinctively the right kind of selfish, but he was also a player who really worked well in a team. He'd played wide for Chelsea and City. He was able to take up positions and allow other people to flourish. And him and Aspas play really well at times in this little spell. Aspas makes the space. One
of the things that was interesting when we signed Sturridge in previous January was you heard all these questions about his attitude and his temperament, and I always thought what I liked about him was he always wound up like the right people.
Yeah.
And people seem to have an issue with him.
Yes.
And throughout this season, I think he slowly changes some of those people's minds. But for the people that never had an issue with him, we all just loved him. And there's people that I meet today, right? People like Mike Bancoli, who will say his favourite Liverpool player is Daniel Sturridge. He loves it. And you look at the numbers and what he achieved compared to the greats. But I'm not arguing against that because for this 18 months, I was lucky enough in this season to meet him. I absolutely loved him.
He was a rock star, wasn't
he? He was so personal. like to sort of me that because I heard all that stuff on the coaches about he's got an attitude problem and all of this sort of stuff. And
We
it's
all
like,
know what a lot of that is code for.
of course.
I think it was just a really important footballer for lots of people.
Yeah.
Not least for us. Who we're almost like people are letting us into something a little bit, to enjoy and share. And I think that was just fantastic. And he's doing it now on telly. He's winding the right people up. Without even trying to.
There was a
Being
thing.
himself.
Have a nice time.
Yeah.
There was a thing I think in Esquire this season where they had a big feature on Daniel Sturridge, and they described him as like either the first or the only hipster footballer. And he did like a model shoot. He had loads of different like trainers and loads of different clothes on, and that's the sort of stuff that wound some people up.
Yeah.
But I thought it was.
But he was a serious footballer.
Yeah.
It wasn't someone who.
But he was also
flattered to deceive.
He was
or
also a
didn't
hipster.
Produce. Yeah.
And he was really cool.
Yeah.
So that's great.
One of the things that the United game's a good example of. So when he does the arms in the United game, the camera's moving all over the place, but also he's doing lads hanging off him as he's doing it, and he's doing it, for a want of a better phrase of describing it, really aggressively. Like he's doing it pumped up.
Well, Man United, the champions, we need to remember.
Yeah.
They turn into a bit of a shambles quite quickly, but they're coming as champions, and it's only the third game, so we don't know.
We don't know. We've got no sense of that at all. Moyes wins his first match. By the way, I remember watching Moyes' first match out.
They win like 4-0 or something.
After they look handsy.
Solid, and everyone thinks, yeah.
So, but when he does it, I remember, and it's like there's people jumping all over him, but he's doing it pumped up. And there's the thing with the arms. Sometimes you do it when you've scored a goal that wins a game comfortably, and it's all a bit of a laugh. But that was him doing. I'm doing my celebration, but I've scored my goal. I've scored against Manchester United. It was huge. And then the way the rest of that game goes, Liverpool fight for their fucking lives. It's worth saying United don't create very much. One, because Liverpool play well, but also two, because they're going to have the shortcomings that we're going to see. But to your point, we don't know they're there yet. We don't know that this is going to be a Man United side that's short of creativity, and we're just shutting down every single angle. And also, it's the last one before the international break, and it's a reminder. I think it's a really important reminder that we now become a bit complacent about. But back then, because points hauls weren't what they were going to become almost immediately after this season, you get fucking 9 points from your first three. It feels like you've cheated.
Well, it's Liverpool's best start since 94-95, and I couldn't believe that. I was like, has anyone counted? I saw that before when I was doing the research for the show, and I just couldn't believe it. But it goes back to someone's point earlier about like the fact that, relatively speaking, it's been a bit crap to be a Liverpool fan. So, they're not, there hadn't been sort of the glories. But to take your point, Neil, like, we're sat here now, we could be Coventry on sort of this one. Liverpool have won 6 of the first 7. It's a bit like Big Wow, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like, whereas it just was harder. It was harder to
or certainly rarer.
Yeah, to get sort of big numbers of points.
And also there wasn't that maybe that there was maybe still the post-Ferguson hangover of you ease your way into a season, you'll see where you are at Christmas, you'll then go from there. Where we are now, where it just feels like, how are you getting to 95? What's your plan for 95? Because you best include 9 of the first 9. Because if not, you're going to feel like you're a bit snookered. You're going to feel like you're behind already. You're losing on the count already. That hadn't quite settled yet. United started the previous season really strongly and didn't look back, not least because everyone else sort of faded away. But the idea of, the idea that you had to be there all the way through just hadn't been the case. But you're just sort of looking around going, this is back to where everyone's pitching the tent. Straight after the United game, the one that, it's 3 from 3, and we are the 3 people that you're talking to, John, and I include you as the 4th, we are all saying that these could do anything here. Not these could just beat the champions. Yeah,
and how are they for it with each other, for each other?
I'd completely forgotten that United were champions the year before.
Yeah.
And this is the first season post-Ferguson, which obviously, we've been waiting for that for years, and we knew there'd be a drop-off. And I remember later on in the season when we go to Old Trafford, and I was a bit nervy after years and years and years of that club. I remember you saying to me in New York, but we got a good manager and they haven't.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh yeah, that's
that was a massive Brendan Rodgers day.
Yeah. And they haven't had and they've always had a good manager.
Yeah.
That was always he was always over us as like a sort of spectre.
There's lots of days when we'll talk about Suarez and Gerrard and Sturridge and individual footballers doing things that were extraordinary. But that one is a good example where the manager was extraordinary. Where he just had a game plan that outfoxed an experienced Premier League manager, regardless of whether that job was too big for him. He's not an idiot, David Moyes.
No.
It was really impressive.
But what he did really well throughout the season was get the best out of what he had, and he does that, by the end in terms of finding this team to create this front six that Martin's talking about. But he's doing it here as well, where he hasn't got some of those players. Some of them haven't emerged yet. One of them still suspended. Some of them, are to come in the transfer window and things like that, which we'll sort of come on to. But throughout the season, he's making good and practical decisions based on what we've got. And people don't think practical is winning 5-3, but
Liverpool
it is.
Out on their January transfer target that so many hopes are pinned on Conor Plianka, and there's no a valid criticism is we were happy to go 16 million for this fella, go to the mattresses.
Tried to get Salah that January, so which is a bit mad.
We've missed out on people like Mkhitaryan and lots of footballers who had really high profiles. Diego Costa, I
can't remember when that is exactly, but
so we have missed out on a lot of things and ended up with some things that probably aren't exactly what he would have wanted. But working with that it's your job. It's your job, especially when you don't manage Manchester City. Yeah, that's your job.
One more thing, just on this United game, is it's the game where there was Hodgson said he got a seat that was not befitting of an England manager.
Oh yes, did he not get sandwiches or something?
Yeah.
I remember seeing Henry Winter's tweet on the way back, walking along. When you really picture where you were, walking past like where the new police HQ is now on St Anne Street, walking back into town, probably to meet you for a pint, and just seeing that and thinking this is crowned the day. I probably still had it on my screen to show you when we got into Henry and Roy have absolutely capped the day. But honestly, whoever decided not to give Hodgie his butties.
I read loads of match reports for this, and it's amazing how many of them tell you that boy Hodgson was there watching, and I'm like, I don't give a fuck. And I don't think it was a case for Southgate. I don't think last season people were going, "I'm glad if Southgate was there, to watch Raheem Sterling or whatever." Like it felt like something that we should have given a shit about. And obviously, when he didn't get his divided the seat.
It was not all we've got to remember is it was not a seat befitting of an England manager.
And there was something about the hospitality as well, not just the seat.
Absolute man of the people, isn't he? Yeah. There's people stuck in corners, looking around pillars, and trying to see. And he's probably somewhere up on the halfway line.
Yeah,
but it's still not befitting
of an England manager.
Yeah. Well, he did.
He probably didn't pay for it either.
Well, of course not. Of course not. But he did just about from wherever he was see a Liverpool win. They put Liverpool top of the league. It was now an international break, and Roy Hodgson's off to wreck some footballers. We'll leave it there for this. This has been part one. We'll start rattling through the games a little bit more in part two. But hope you've enjoyed it. A huge thanks again for Green King Sports for partnering with us, for helping us get this wonderful location. We are in Lime Street Central. Do pop in next time you're about, next time you're getting a train. We're just going to go and replenish our drinks and get going with part two, which you won't get quite yet, but you won't have to wait too long. Up to Reds.